Let me remind all of ourselves to take a moment and cultivate bodhicitta motivation, the highest form of motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the benefit of all other sentient beings. And at least we should generate such a contrived bodhicitta motivation and participate in this Lamrim teaching on the stage of the path leading to enlightenment. To give you the blessing of oral transmission, or lung in Tibetan, allow me to read about a page or so from the Lamrim text, volume number 3 in the English translation.
Chije malo para mingi vesere de jungle da jungle mare de men zima ye she su be jero de lo ga jo mi re che ba de ne ta ye jang ga ja do du be zawa ne go do du be zawa ni ka na ga ja ta ji ki ba jo ro de ga je ni tar du bo cha no ne ma ge ba ma lu pa sang ma lu na 예배 따르던 이용과 공부를 시험 받제 비베 시바다 저 민누서 하정아 대신나와 가버라 셔 시험 가버 셔 최마시 바 전에 유대 대신 대신 집을 뭐 수jo 예배 따르는 시 다와 대신 저 최바를 시도 디제를 가져 원래 뭐 시험 뭐 계셔 딩우 마시나 영나 딱다다야 노셰다 도메사와 제베셰로 니빠 가자 무슨 바라 가자 무슨 무슨 바고 베 힐루가 발니 다테 샤우스 데 당은도 균좀되게 되다 간제 그 건네 토버셔다 인데 토버셔 리바니도 토버셔다 상지 쇼그시 디 토야데 인 가르치서 다음에 동공으로 인디 토고레스 다디 어때 다음에 동공발 인 가자고 있어 그래서 디제 샤르발
So Geshe read from page 125 in the English translation of Lamrim Chenmo, volume number 3. And the caption reads, misidentifying the objects to be negated, those who are on e-book or something, with no page numbers that I can tell you. And he stopped on page 126. Just to remind ourselves how we got here, some of the things we talked about last time is what is our ultimate spiritual goal that we are pursuing, which basically is enlightenment. And then the next one is how can we get there as a destination, or how can we actualize enlightenment. And so how can we actualize enlightenment is dependent upon our realization of selflessness, or tagme in Tibetan, or sometimes we can translate as emptiness. And so then again, how can we realize emptiness? That itself is a very broad topic. And so with regard to that, we said the first thing we must do, which is essential and very, very important, is to precisely identify what is called the object of negation, or object of refutation. The Tibetan term is gakcha. What is negated or refuted? Gakcha, right? If we miss that point, then we won't be able to understand precisely what selflessness is.
다 가서 그서 매배 기대 상황당 대신에 다 런시베 통도 예바 지거 어디니네 인티 공과 티 통도는 공시 톱제 토우레스 다티미 공딜라야 식셀리 게데 뉴모바 넘당 레당 류넘 치워보던 주분남티 데다 탄지 테코나니 마인지 뭐지 티세 총결라서 와 따르데코나니 마인 셴디 시반남 테코나니 나바나와 이노스 어디 다건조야 고자나주 인데 수수주네 돈이 마도 저라 근데 그래서 레당스다 레준데서 레여와 다가도 루이스는 인데 레게 방배 루이시 루남 건제다 코에 추여서와 어 디부트 다디 인데 레게 미긴 리부시 인데 대다 탐지 비게 인데 런시 좋아하는 거 요레스 신데 런시 좋아하면 데 티세 총제 런시 비게 또베 따서마도 저 간주 나와들 요 말이 어디 예고를 했어.
In order to realize emptiness of intrinsic existence, Rangshinji Meba, if you will, we need to the analysis which involves a lot of critical thinking and reasoning, if you will. And a part of that critical thinking and reasoning, right in the beginning, is to precisely identify what is being negated or refuted, the object of negation or Gyeltsen, without which we will not be able to understand precisely what emptiness of intrinsic reality or existence is. And so as it is described in sixth cell, clear word commentary, and Geshe explained that we, the sentient beings, or the ordinary people especially, the way we experience things is this way, that everything that exists in samsara or cyclic existence, and everything that we do called karma, and everything that karma brings called karmic results or outcomes, all of these things really appear to us as if they exist intrinsically. Okay? All things that exist in samsara appears to our perception as having intrinsic reality or intrinsic existence. So which means we really don't understand how everything is merely labeled, or mere labels, as we Tibetans say. Tokpa taksam. Tokpa is conceptual labeling. Taksam is simply label, merely label reality. And many examples are used to demonstrate that reality, such as everything is like the town of Gandharvas or the spirits, right? Really, it isn't there on its own or objectively, but it exists. So all phenomena exist as merely labeled reality, but we don't see it or experience it that way. For us, all things appear as intrinsically existent.
There is a young Dikona, but Dikona don't do what she said, Jewish, none the chief over Mamuk Ban, none the Chelas, Dod Zimba, the Dakins of Navatan Seva, then Dikona, you know. Dikona in Jubane, you moved on Molly, Tajon, Loyton, Dandy, Ezobay, Dangochi, Shala, Soviet, Omajubal, so show here about things. Then the nature take on in Juba, Daging, Malupa, Road one day, Coes, Coanti, Zoji, Yawatopara, Shela, Theatre, Yawatopana, Coes, Coan, Jizo, Tari, Zoji, Tongi, Dani, Jizo, Tawati, Miguel, Tonla, Da Mami, Jizo, Tawapong, Jizola, Tawapong. 就做了到半星期，这方面你们的项目那种把那从多把同意，可惜大的这边这与大的小啊，这一些他们可能这个要到把写多写松说是，我这大的看这是呢，这大的可能一些的看这些呢，可是。现在主要现在吃的那是吃水的，大概对一点钟些，看见他，我就我个吃那你如果说了，有的话的那些吃，地毛地方这着了，我个吃吃，但可是我不可是吃的能可能的吃，我不没明白那是，吃的我不个没心没明白，能的吃大的吧，当可。我不可能被你做来让心我这一般了。因为当时这个呢，我得让许这帮几个人是。现在他就是当时有的那个是吧，那不是谁吧？那这个呢是谁是那的，要么就被年不谁定什么的。或者刚才我们这不干什么？刚才让许这边干什么叫是吧？我这里这个呢是个的是。我这些，现在这个呢，他就这里就做开始是呢，你们叫那么的就做，但说是当他，因为说是不给。 但是我们就不告诉，可是的，这些告诉我们就不来，那大家告诉的，你们的帮助的呢，这个做公司的，我们就不告诉了，写过去，希望这样的吧。我们就不告诉他写，可是 你们叫那么里就做了，但是说来当也得那是白当我把西西，现在都早见他，你可呀早就开始现在你这个通的，是吧？但是我来通就是是吧？少数了是被你们当，这个你那是拉上被你种，还是东西有些看看，你就做到都通的。ini dan tanya dia ini dah ini miu tu song ne ini dia orang sih coba goya dia dia coba dia goya res tapi miu dia tanya dia ngat song gau jadi orang sih coba ngat gau goya dia gau res.
So Geshe read from page 125 to 126, but he went back to the bottom page 21, and now it's over 22, where he left off explaining things last time. Okay, so that's where, at the bottom of page 121, you find the passage quoted from Chandrakirti's clear word commentary, or Siksel in Tibetan. Now we're on page 122. So in order to internalize our spiritual goal or enlightenment, we must realize ultimate reality as it is, thatness, suchness as it is, tathatha as it is, if you like the Sanskrit term. And so what is explained here is that everything that exists could be classified into two categories: external phenomena or external objects, if you will. So this would include the external environment and all the things we find in the environment, mountains, the waterfalls, and the rivers, and you just name it. Okay? And the internal phenomena, which we understood in terms of our minds and the world of minds or the subjectivity and so forth. So whether it is an external phenomenon or an internal phenomenon, for us ordinary sentient beings, things do not appear, in the way they actually exist. They appear to us as intrinsically existent. Yeah? And the reason why is because of our grasping at intrinsic reality, dangzin, if you will. So we need to figure out how things appear to us, and how things actually exist. As is stated here, and Geshe explained that we need to refer back to what Chandrakirti has stated in his supplement to the middle way or Madhyamik Avatar Umajupa, where he explained about how at the very root of all our afflictive emotions or kleshas or the nyönmong is the jikta, the transitory view, or the view of perishing aggregates. That's a whole mouthful to say. Okay, I want to go back to my transitory view. I like it. Okay, jikta. So he identified jikta, or the transitory view, as the source of all other afflictive emotions, right? So under the influence of afflictive emotions, we create all kinds of karmic actions, and then they produce their results, and we are the ones who experience, right, karmic outcomes. And as a part of that processes, in our life, we experience, like we have already experienced birth, and then sickness, aging, and goodbye at the end of the life, and all of that. Okay. But the thing for us to understand is that there is I or a self that exists conventionally. In other words, there is a conventional I or a self. We call Tanya de Yubeta in Tibetan. Yeah. Focusing on the conventional I or the self, we misperceive it, or it appears to us as intrinsically existent. Yeah. And then we believe in that appearance of intrinsic reality. We say, that's how it exists. Yeah. And that's why we are not able to understand emptiness or the selflessness at the moment. And so in our critical thinking and analysis meditation, what we really need to figure out is how conventional I or the self, Tanya de Yubetak, those who are learning Tibetan, is the focal object, but it appears to us as intrinsically existent, and we believe in that appearance or in that intrinsic reality. Yeah? And that's how we grasp at the intrinsic self. Now, if we figure out that conventional self does not exist the way it appears to exist through our mind intrinsically, then we are able to understand what selflessness is what the emptiness of intrinsic self is.
Da kan je zhe se de ne bi ge zhe de zang ne da de bi ge ri be do ne ma mi bu ni bu tong yin za ne ka za da ma mi ba zang de ne ji da de bi ge ka za bang ba yin na ko za de ko li yin za ji da de bang yin na ne ji da de jie be ne de sha kon lo sa bi ni mo da jie ge ne la ba jong tam jong do ba tong ne ne tang bo ko ne be ge da ji da de kan je ji na sam ne jo ba ta ba de ge di ji wu ji ti be 이 개시험을 해야 되는 제거를 다 또버시에서는 제거를 할.
No, sure. So if we can figure out, as a matter of fact, we the yogis or the practitioners here, meditators, have been advised that our first task of the job is to figure out how conventional self, appears to our perception and how it actually exists. Yeah? And so through our critical thinking analysis, if we are able to see for ourselves that self exists conventionally but not intrinsically, just the way it appears to our mind, then we will be able to, challenge, if you will, a transitory view or the jigta. Okay? Now jigta is really shaken here. And freaks out. Okay, maybe that's the modern version translation. Jigta freaks out with that our realization. And when the jigta, the transitory view, is uprooted from our psyche or the mind, then all other afflictive emotions that arise from jigta, attachment, lust, anger, hostility, and all of those things will stop from arising. So when all these afflictive emotions stop, right, or they are abandoned, if you will, then we will no more have to experience all the negative outcomes of karma, such as aging, sickness, dying, and all of the other craziness we experience in our life, because now we are no more under the influence of jigta and afflictive emotions. Yeah.
지 당시에 그 최를 타입의 인상 최를 담을 주베 리바 타입을 다 최 상장의 최를 담을 주베 시제를 담을 주베 리바 연구를 봐.
맞아요.
어디 연구래디 내다 준 도르니 그게 지준 도르든시나. 근데 다다 다긴자 니디 간제 나다 가인자 바티 오메 로야 리바 티고니 니 셰고레스. 어디제도 고베 리바 도마송장 내저 번주베세 도르든으로 제가 뜻송네는 데다다 사실없이 예배되바레스 상제장게 다가란 신 대샤스 어디거리에서 다 디지스다 아니 조조디야 최전다 소버레디는 다다 나다 이즈베 다다 풍부니 라이 뭐로디 간 땡페고 그러봐 어디 땡파이 다다 풍부니 라시메 땡파서디잖아 근데 디릭바디게 저 현다 가발 잖아 최전가래 뭐 이제 그 리베 뇌지 바래고 그러봐 이제도 그 이집에 쉬어가가 라모고 지 디바드 찍주셔도 강가 추주하셔 그러봐 제다 디가 되는 더 자와셔라가서 라지 제가도 되시오래는 무다빨때 디저왈도 시에자스 인 식세가도 다가란 샤샤니 송샤스 어디 송고야 유전자부터 되래서 그렇다
So what is stated in commentary on the chapter 8 in the Fundamental Wisdom Treatise, Mula Madhyamika by Arya Nagarjuna, and also in Buddhapalita's commentary called Buddhapalita, and also in Chandrakirti's clear word commentary or sixth cell, where all of them have unanimously agreed upon, okay, is this, that when we look at phenomena, they are just innumerable, but a variety of phenomena. Yeah. It is true that every phenomenon has its emptiness, so to speak. Yeah. And if we have to deal with emptiness of every phenomenon, that becomes like a endless task, because phenomena are just innumerable. Yeah. But however many phenomena are, they can be kind of looked at, in terms of, if you will, no, let me put it this way. Yes, in terms of understanding self and mind, right? Self and mind, ta and tagiwa, right? I and what is mine. Okay. So if we can focus on I and mine, ta and tagiwa in Tibetan, and understand selflessness, right? These two selflessnesses, by using all kinds of reasonings, right? There are all tons of reasonings out there. Once we really realize selflessnesses of I and mine, then basically it is for us to be able to kind of shift our focus onto any other phenomenon and apply the same reasoning and logic, and we should be able to understand selflessness of that phenomenon or those phenomena as well. Yeah. And another way to express selflessness of I and mind is how we often say we need to figure out the nature of aggregates, sugandhas, right? And then the self that is imputed onto the aggregates. So basically, we can think also in terms of self and aggregates. If we can figure out, ultimate nature of self and aggregates through reasonings of all kind, then by focusing on some other phenomenon, we should also be able to figure out that phenomenon's, selflessness. And so this is like, if we have learned the secret to untie this kind of a knot, right, then we have learned how to untie the knot of all these other things, right? But if we haven't figured out how to untie this knot, we are stuck, okay? And so that's the metaphor being used here.
我这觉得，这种熊肯定现在在路上没得几块的，感觉咱们店里头上呢，通过大概是的，我店里头我说，这他怕个就是现在这不行了。我说他被农业这我他忙不用的，他没用过，就是可是大概是吧的，你说是吧的，第二天来给我3年考的哇，我说我说有的嘛，一般都嘛是学这个学，现在我说有的嘛有呢，第二天你们这个嘛是吧？就是过这些他没是吧？但咱们店里头在刚开始过去往桌上学，他们当面是拉不里没学的，我说刚你这我说怎么能够打是吧？我说考强过嘛是吧？现在提起这个挺起来。
So in, I think, lower schools of Buddhist thought or the tenets, they also agree that those who would like to realize selflessness presented in different schools of thought, they really need to focus on self and aggregates. Okay, these two types of phenomena, if you will. And if you can figure out selflessness of these two types of phenomena, then it will be easier for us to figure out selflessnesses of all other phenomena. And so the reason why that is so crucial for us to figure out is because all kinds of suffering and problems and headaches we experience in our life are basically due to grasping at self and mind, or grasping at self and aggregates. Yeah? Because of those graspings, we experience all other types of afflictive emotions or nyunmon, klesha, and under their influence, we create all kinds of karmic actions, and these karmic actions produced all these unwanted results, right? Sickness, headache, stress, whatever, all of those things. Well, he didn't say stress, but I think that's relevant for us modern people, right? So I threw it in. My first footnote there. And also, I mean, these two types of phenomena, self and aggregates, are very personally relevant, isn't it? Really, our being in samsara is basically because of our grasping at self and aggregates. Yeah, we say that we have to understand the selfless and all other phenomena, but there are maybe tons of phenomena which in a sense have no personally relevant to us. Okay? For example, there are things that are grasping at the intrinsic reality of space. We call it what called Dumache, unproduced phenomenon. I don't think that really keeps us in the samsara, because I mean that seems to have not much everyday relevance to us. What keeps us in samsara is our grasping at our aggregates and the self. Yeah? And if we can figure out, right, the ultimate nature of self and aggregates, then it should be easy for us to understand the selfless of all other phenomena, whether they are really directly related to our life or not, including the unproduced space and those permanent phenomena. Okay?
Keten de tikjin ba de ne tiba shibu tikodan shibu suito mo moyene tena da da gzaba so to tikodan yimiri ge da da gyo ran shin ji me baten la paba tsam le che yi da me ten paba mebe tikodan shibu lamdu miru so nyam na jo me dis da di tsuba de kaje da di de ene da gyo de ene ran yi zba de मेवा तो दिखोम ने न संगी को थोड़ी लारवा से तो दादी पिजे दी जोगे दी से दी होता सिमजाम बता रंजी तो इन सारवा सिमजाम रंजी तो के ने रंजते बे दामी से रंजते बे दामी तो को में देवा मतो को मारवा से दा किन बस दी तो रंजते बे क्या करो को अच्छा जे तो दी रवा दी छा दी तो रंजते बे जे तो आते निरां के तो को मारवे तो को बस से तो दी गोमने ने बे 상지요 그거 가져 토그려 왔어요. 이 톱도 뭐라 이랑 도모를 좀 말해야지. 어다 드세요.
semsabada rangjibogi ke rangje tebe jeji tongwa to mado chegi tanda jirwa tendukda
rangje tebe jeji tongwa tela tenu ene 상지요 그거 또 누구 말아 너 대바 지라 많이 누구라 와 어디 다 semsabada rang지 이게 ene 상지요 그거 또 쉬기 당면 또 그러면 가서다 rangje tebe 디펜도 와
So a qualm or a doubt has been raised, or a question has been raised here. And what has been contended here is, in order to achieve enlightenment, we must realize emptiness of intrinsic reality, that kind of selflessness, okay? Without which we will never be able to be enlightened. And now, critiques, if you will, they raise a question pertaining to that. And maybe these critics also include what we called Chidamatrins, mind-only schools, as well as Sevatandega Madhyamikans, right? The other sub-school in the Middle East school. Okay. So they said, how come okay, now something I missed it again. Tanda dirwa kasa rangun drube tongwa tona tanda ke sanje koma thogla ruwa ge and they can stop sigre
da gyo drube tongwa to sona
lo
da gyo da rangi moro da gyo rangi to na sanje koma thogla ruwa da semza ba da roji da gyo tongwa se ate khasa rangi to shigar me di chi da bi shag marwa ati ma ta di tawa to mari di ta dije tum go shi wa marwe ndi sanje kare to re so
and so if we realize the selflessness of I, or the self, and aggregates, then we will be able to realize enlightenment. That's the contention, right? It's contended. So now that has been contested by, say, Chidamatrins or Mind-Only School and Sevatandega Madhyamikans. Okay, he said, how is that possible? Because they said that even Shervakas, or the hearers, the realized ones, right? And there are those, they also realize the selflessness of self and aggregates, but, they have not become Buddha, right? And how is it possible? Yeah, so they're trying to raise an objection here. The idea behind this, raising objection is because Chidamatrins and Siddhartha Madhyamikans, they are looking at from that common perspective about selflessness view, which is actually the selflessness of self-sufficient and substantially existent self, right? Rangya thube zeyu tongba. Rangya self-sufficient, zeyu substantially existent self, right? That kind of self doesn't exist. And if you realize that kind of selflessness, right, then they said, how could you become Buddha? There are many among the Shervakas or the hearers who have realized that, but they are not Buddhas.
어디 제다 지도 좀에 다 다그즈마 나바탄 세바 니 레스 뉴무 라르메제 저기 때는 방바 네 팀메라 라 요메장 지난 그 쉬기 쉬追배 세마탐지 세마탐지 때 마믹바 방바야 방바니 슈기인데 셔도 달랑시메바 또바테나 디연아디 주고 풍번남 랑신 여반자바 노반주 셔데 신가증나 콜어서 봐 디연아 연아 남장세 측바해노 시다 다 중요 말스 될야 에네 지당에 베가 다다게 뭐 메바도네 에네 타바서 타발 인도 요래디 에네 베게 다 뉴몬바 베게 가서 박자 간지 박자 저 베게 최담지를 베게 다 백무슨 간지 상이요 고마 타바 딜리 빵발라 에네 데도 그래스 가서 에네 상이요 고마 도 그래스 어디서 다다다 에네 당메도야 직바이나 에네 디탈 케버시니 조주 상지 고마 도야지다 에네 타비 케라마지네 이랑 상주 도야지 니요르바 어디 다디다다 레 작동원에 버시나 에네 당메 데다다 라제테 바테 마레 에네 데 랑시 마르 당메 디 세가 용고야 르도디 다디 카미도 카지 가다지 디 당메 디 가레 랑시 마르 당메 텔 자르바 티바 숨가 당메 또 가지 바 되고라 제다 타고 데 세가 셰 먹고 마도
알아 땡기 베chen
땡기오시네 당메 가 가지 바라
타고 케버시니
니랑도 도야다 티지도 도지 바라 세다 지와인다 디 히샤샤니 비자 당메 미라스 켈라면도 지문에 진짜 용단데 당메니 다그마레 실라고야 진도가 세다 다시다 타두르데 또자 지반도 다 레도 장 디고라 니랑 도야다 티지도 당메 지바라 세다 당메 지바레디 엔데들야 엔탑지 시마지다 디데샤니 니 디바탐지 빵야다 윤조 장빵야 디데 켜바 요레스 제다 딜야 당메도야 직바이나 빵자 강가 직바 방고 말이 디 상지 터버 디신 디고 상지 고모 토야 요레스 고다
I think the way seems like Prasangika has answered it seems to be very tactful, you know, in the use of the word. So now, in the Prasangika Madhyamikans, they said that no, there is no such problem, and they said the difference is although selflessness that is realized is the same in the case of Shervakas or Patika Buddhas or Bodhisattvas, and the reason why for some of them that realization is able to get rid of or purify just the afflictive emotions, not the imprints of the emotions. And for others, that realization helps to purify not only the afflictive emotions, but along with the imprints, has to do with how that realization is combined with special means or upaya method. Okay, and so Geshe said, here the text does not clearly say, and we would expect them to answer this way probably if we have a choice, right? They say, you know what? Well, the selflessness you are talking about and the selflessness I'm talking about are not same. So therefore, right? But it doesn't say that, okay? Here, right? That's how probably we want it to be answered, right? Because your selflessness is the selflessness of self-sufficient, substantial existent self. And what we are talking about is the selflessness of intrinsic reality, right? But that's not how it is clearly stated in the text, not explained. Because from Prasangika Madhyamikan points of view, right, their own standpoint, they look at that, they said, as far as selflessness or emptiness is concerned, it's exactly the same, okay? And it is possibly be realized by Shervakas and Patika Buddhas as well. Their realization of emptiness is the same as the realization of emptiness by Mahayanis or Bodhisattvas. no qualitative difference. Okay? And so they assume, okay, that's what it is. But they said, why? Now the Sharvakas who realized that kind of selflessness is still stuck, not Buddhas yet. Of course, they have attained nirvana. They are free from the afflictive emotions, but not from the imprinted emotions, is because that realization is not combined with special means or the method. Whereas, Mahayanists, as they combine that realization with skillful means, they are able to be free from the two mental obscurations, obscuration to liberation and obscuration to omniscient wisdom, and so therefore, they could be enlightened with that realization. Okay, is that clear? Okay, thank you.
Well, dear Jesus,
To celebrate it, I'm drinking tea now. Yeah, no, it's good.
you take this is what that, and that Ranshima was that is Dami City, Dami to City, and Ranshate with Dami the Siwamara, that Ranshima was Towatel ten Siwara. So that Ranshima was tell ten any Dagio Ranshima, Bunga de Ranshima Tores.
No, so.
She thought sure you don't do
No, so.
or did do it. She thought, because that Ranshima was take it and Dagio Pumba Ranshima Tokumare did. She not tell it then. Yonja Pumba Ranshima is the Dogo Maris. And the Pumba Loga shows that you Dagio Ranshima don't do this.
No, so.
Don't do this. That big bit need to tell any this word. Check Tower came, tell you good tower is as baby.
Long.
You are, what did you want? The don't you do what they should check out those on any Shendal, Repub Cup on the remote. She don't talk, go Morsi or what it all do this.
No, sir.
But the type pen because this is that Sing that six or the Sing that made six on.
No.
And the Sing that six and the color to the six I used to Tawayamara, and color that in Damatus Mel Shazarawa. What did you want it was?
No, sir. Of course, when the Pasangika Madhyamikins, they contend that realizing selflessness, emptiness can bring about enlightenment, they just assume that everybody, understand it, that they are talking about selflessness of intrinsic reality or emptiness of intrinsic reality. Okay, so that's their assumption. Yeah. So if we realize selflessness of a person or the self or I, then we will also be able to realize selflessness of phenomena or aggregates. Okay? It's not that the mind that realizes the selflessness of a person also realizes the selflessness of phenomena. It is because that you have realized the selflessness of a person through your critical reasoning and all of that. Now, if you shift your focus to your aggregates, by the power of that realization, you can easily also realize the selflessness of aggregates or phenomena as well. Yeah. So the reason for this is, as Geshe quoted from his memory beautifully, the two lines, and which I happen to know, but I don't know whether I can beautifully render it in English. That's my challenge. It is stated that literally translating first and then translating the explanation given. The view of, or the reality of one phenomenon is the same as the reality of all other phenomena. Okay? So what that says is, if we truly realize emptiness of a phenomenon, whatever that phenomenon is, X, Y, Z, then we should be able to realize the emptiness of all other phenomena, because qualitatively, there should not be any difference in terms of the emptinesses of all phenomena. Because once you realize emptiness of one phenomenon, the emptiness of all other phenomena is exactly the same thing. Okay? And that's why, once we realize the emptiness of a cell, we should also be able to realize the emptiness of aggregates as well. Okay? And the example given to that, to illustrate that point is, how that realization destroys all our delusions is, if we think in terms of a chariot, right, shingda in Tibetan, the one with the wheels, right? If the chariots get burned, then really all different parts of the chariots are burned, right? We cannot say Well, chariot is burned, but look at the spike or the herb of the chariot. It's not burned. No, it's all burned. Right? It's a part of the chariot. Only then we can talk about, right? Chariot is completely destroyed or burned. Yeah. So in the same way, once we realize emptiness of a phenomenon, we have realized the complete emptiness, so to speak. There's nothing, right? Something left over emptiness that's not yet realized. So, no.
现在大人疫苗多少年呢？那个不让人这玩意，这老多这边提出一个头的是，但他这个都提送的话，你当这当的，可是啥？当没到个人把的了呀，当这这边人把些呢，去当这个这个是，是吧？当没到的看啥他们人多个是他，但是这么些有些脾气他这块的，对的，他有些现在没那个他们过些，现在这是我的，他那的了样。 이 감지 쇼디지도 감지 야 풍부 대바송을 담에 또 뭐세야 영숑 제르부 송만 보여와 요래 니 풍부 대마마도 가자 데미 또 말스 고바라세야 요래 자예도 요래 가서 요래 요 디서 가레세나 다 라리시모데 마르지 제시 제샤 에티카레세나 풍부랑 그 정신이 저 케랑사서나 근데 가자 되면 또 요 말이스. 진짜 손다 제가 풍부랑 제 마도는 가자 되면 또 말이스. 또 라레 마도 제 일이야 풍부 되면 또 그래. 돈다 말이스. 어디 송자.
당부 당진 개변 오늘 전에 당부 최고 당진이
네. 당부 그 풍부 된데 나힐 된 풍벌 메고로 봐.
당부 마시 달을 신주세요 말이야.
뭐 당부 미드 풍벌 메고.
알아놓았어.
근데 다 다기즈마다 나다 다기즈 가다 나다 다기인데 당부 가인즈 저기 간지 되게레스. 근데 가인즈 맞게고로 봐. 다 최이단자 가서 당부 풍벌 다힐 맹 다히랑 저기 좀 지고로 봐. 대신에 현에 강사를 좀 지고 봐. 당저를 좀 지고 봐.
알아놓았어.
당지 깨버려 봐서 최이 당생을 지고. 당면 또 버리 봐. 강사 되면 또 그래서 그래서는 강사디 지고로 봐. 각자 지단 쳐봐요 말디. 키히네 때지 강사 당면에 에네 롤게라요 그래서. 그리고 그래서는 지단데 그래서는 가서 최담제에 땡지 셰프가리 간거 뚜르 셰다데 레와디.现在 강사한테 또 잡혀도와. 시원자 민다지 레와 소도 소와서 희와서 소와서 자민도 망고 소바지 강사시고 그 람사 독도르지 민도와. 그래. 그래서 또 잡혀서 다 그 다수전이야베 레라 도카도와. 다 독도르 지기나 그 지단데 그 차게세 이 람사한테 요고 릭직 바래도와. 강사들 릭문도 뭐래 뭐래 소다 소와 디서 뭐뭐서 가사다고 와. 어디 산들이다.
So according to Rinpoche or Lama Tsongkhapa, in terms of arisal of graspings, grasping at phenomena arises first, and then the grasping at the self, a person. In terms of realizing selflessnesses, right? First, we realize the selflessness of a person or the self, and then the selflessness of phenomena. Do you see the difference in terms of the how order of things? In terms of grasping at phenomena arises first, and then grasping at person or the self. In terms of realizing selflessnesses, according to Lama Tsongkhapa, it is relatively speaking easier to realize the selflessness of a person first as compared to the selflessness of phenomena. Okay? So the reason for that is not that the two selflessnesses are qualitatively different. Selflessness is selflessness. Whether it's of a person or phenomena, zippo, same, no difference. But in terms of the basis upon which the selflessness is established, selflessness of a person is relatively speaking easier to understand. And that's because we say the self of a person, it exists in dependence upon, not independence. In dependence upon collection of his or her psychosomatic aggregates, right, skandhas. And so the relationship between self and his or her aggregates is very tight and intimate, and in some sense kind of easy to conceptualize, understand, right? Because self is not only dependent upon one aggregate, but self is dependent upon 5 aggregates in our cases, right? There's a form aggregate of feelings, and all of those things. So if something is dependent upon a collection of many things, then that interdependent nature is really easy to conceptualize it. But you know what? Wow, self really depends upon a lot of aggregates, not 1, not 2, not 3, 5 of them, right? But if we have to think about interdependent nature of one single phenomenon or thing, yes, everything has parts, right? It's a little harder for us to conceptualize it, isn't it? It's a little harder to think that, oh, this is dependent arising. Yeah, I know what are the parts. But for the self, it's a little easier. It's dependent upon too many aggregates, actually. Yeah? So that's why, according to Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation, because of that, it's easier to realize selflessness of a person, and we realize that first, and then the selflessness of a phenomena. And so as Geshe was giggling over this, you say that then people said, well, in some of his works, like what we called Kongpa Rapsal, unraveling thought, right, of the thought, or even in his commentary on the fundamental wisdom, Geshe, right? Somewhere it seems like Lama Tsongkhapa is saying that we need to understand selflessness of the aggregates first, right, in order to understand the selflessness of a person. Okay. So that does not sit well with, right, his earlier contention that it's easier to realize the selflessness of a person first, right, as compared to the selflessness of aggregates of the phenomena. Are you with me? So what's going on here, right? That's the question. Okay, so why? And so Geshe's clarification is they said that what Lama Tsongkhapa meant in some of his works called Unraveling Thought, Uma Kongpa Rapsa of Middle Way, and commentary on the fundamental wisdom, is this, that in our mind, if we have a belief that aggregates exist intrinsically, then we will never be able to understand the emptiness of the self. If we believe that aggregates exist somehow intrinsically, right, then we will never be able to understand the selflessness of a person or the emptiness of a person. That's what he meant. He does not mean that we have to realize the emptiness of aggregates first in order to realize the emptiness of the person. Okay, so that's the clarification being offered.
La mig bi che che de che be che si khaza da me ba ya to ba min ju tes da be chi phum ba la mig bi che ros che ge da chi zi phum ba yo sa che le ba yo ba zi de le ngan zi je che phum ba rang shi me ba ma do na khaza a ge da me to ba sung bi che ros wa ti re do da sung ji te sung da di sung ya de gar sin di to da dang gi da shi ya de re ju de gar de khaza Kaza Pumbo de Rangi Chuba Kelang ne? Any Kaza Dami to Yamari Sigur Mazi, Kaza Dami Tovala, Pumbo Rangima to with the Sigo Marva. But it Yajun Peja did do Tata del Dua. The Karas the court that did Casa 68 the Karas Sigurs and the Pumbo Rangi Chuba Kelang and the Kaza Rangima Dogmaris, Jizuko Dua. He did Sahi long distance, Pumbo said, Tizi is good. But it did. Na yi shin nge ya phumbo rang shi me to ji khasa da do ha su sha do wa de mare ta di phumbo rang yi chuba khelang ni in khasa da do ya mare nge phumbo rang yi mo ten pha ya khanje pen pha go da phumbo rang yi chu mo so ten pha go da pha de to go mo ba ten pha da to ba de kha yo da ten ma ba ne ta khasa rang ji me to thu go to ba yes what is
So in the middle of page 122, so there is a passage quoted from Chandrakirti's explanation of the middle way, and we also have a quote from Nagarjuna's Ratna Avali or Precious Garland, which reads, I quote, "As long as you conceive of the aggregates, you will conceive of them as I," unquote. And then the last sentence, thus he says that if you do not know that aggregates lack intrinsic nature, you do not know the selflessness of the person. So this is what Geshe was trying to clarify it. Okay, Lama Tsongkhapa does not mean that without realizing the lack of intrinsic nature of aggregates, we cannot realize the lack of intrinsic nature of a person. What he meant is, quoting Nagarjuna's word, if we believe somehow in our heart and the mind that aggregates do exist intrinsically, but we are trying to still understand the lack of intrinsic nature of a several person, forget it. Well, he didn't say that, right? I'm just putting it my English version. We cannot realize it. So that's the meaning of this statement. And so as Geshe said, that now this is why we get so technical. In order to realize the selflessness of the person, we do have to deal with the selflessness of aggregates. We have to establish how aggregates are empty of intrinsic reality. But we don't have to realize it first. Okay? We have to establish, right, the basis of the self lack intrinsic reality. And then we will be able to realize the selflessness of a person. So therefore, right, we are able to, at least, let go that belief in the intrinsic nature of aggregates.
Okay. When the Pomada government of Lochenos, said that children that the Pumora modern Dametomers, the Dametomala Pumora, they don't any Pumora him about the Church Dameravas, Kanzara him about the Kanzar Damerava, Damini Sosomar and Yegeras, logic dog reverse. But that is logic dogma, is that Delgia, that Zobatit, Alizobat Sunken to say,
So again, in the middle of page 122, a qualm has been raised where basically critics contend, that they said, I think you are saying that one needs to realize, selflessness of aggregates in order to realize the selflessness of the person, or what vice versa. So, so do you mean that it's the same mind that realizes the two selflessnesses? In other words, do you mean that the mind that realizes the selflessness of a person also realizes the selflessness of aggregates? Yeah. And if you do, how could it be? Because self and aggregates are two different phenomena, and the one mind cannot realize the selflessnesses of both phenomena. So as we explained before, Lama Tsongkhapa does not contend that it's the same mind that realizes both selflessnesses, right? He said the mind realizing selflessness of a person and the mind realizing the selflessness of phenomena are not one and the same. Okay? By realizing the selflessness of a person, we are able to realize the selflessness of aggregates of the phenomena, but it's a different realization or different mind. And to illustrate that point, the example given here is we can think of, let's say, impermanence of a vase or a pot and the impermanence of a pillar, right? So the impermanence of a pot is not, the same as if you realize the impermanence of a pot, right? You haven't that mind and the mind realizing the impermanence of the pillar are two different minds. In other words, okay. They are not one and the same thing. So just like that, the mind realizing the selflessness of a person and the mind realizing the selflessness of the phenomena are two different minds.
What did that need? Logic dog, no social yoris. The logic dog, they are chat, what came in and what?
No.
The social dog, that social dog is in Kaza Damedo, Pumba Damedo, where Mido, social rate was in that day. You didn't share yourself. This is what they were. Casa Shenyam Sarawa. Chatambo came in and said, Logic, my Israel. And then 저와 더 케이미 저 오마 셰버샤 오스타 저와 이바디 계속 해리 해기 있으러 그것도 그거다 저다 가자를 다 계속 가자 시거잖아 가자를 이마 또 로디 부모랑 힘 매도 냠도 애네 만지장 로디 현了对面的부모랑 힘이 매와 예배시 니신 되는 바 주면나 부모랑 힘比저바지 좀도 줘봐 누비 이노 근데 뒤에서 강사를 이메바 또비체 그래서 또비체 풍부한 심메바 또버 송소스 다들 다들 야데도야 강사를 이메바 또 풍부한 이메바 또 송야 유진 가르에서는 로직 또 말이 로소소 요리에시 이나 인데 강사를 이메바 또 자네 인데 풍부한 이주와 이면서 이거 제바신데 대 쇼마레스 제가 랑 직바 될 때는 인데 풍부한 이메바 예도 그래스 어디 돈다 되레스 로동게 가가샤 그러와
So critics, I think, raised two questions here. Number one said, do you mean it's the same mind that realizes the two selflessnesses? Okay, and they said, if you mean that, that can't be. Okay, because self and phenomena are two different types of phenomena, and so one mind cannot realize the both selflessnesses. Of course, the answer to that question is, as we said, no, those are the two types of realizations, isn't it? The mind that realizes selflessness of person is not the same as the mind that realizes the selflessness of phenomena or aggregates. Just like we said, if you understand the impermanence of a pod, that mind does not really necessarily understand the impermanence of a pillar, right? It's another mind. Yeah. Now, the second contention or the question that raised part of the question is, but if you mean that those are two different minds, right, then what do they have got to do with each other? They said, so what has the realization of selflessness of a person has to do with the realization or the selflessness of a phenomena and vice versa, right? What's the connection between the two? Yeah. Now, the answer to that question is when we realize the selflessness of a person, going through all the critical thinking and analysis, then it induces in us this other realization, if you can call it, right? The selflessness of a phenomena. We don't have to do any analysis or reasoning as well. We can simply shift our focus on to aggregates of the phenomena, and by the power of the previous realization, it induces, right, the subsequent realization of the selflessness of aggregates. Yeah. And so that's the connection between the two. So I'm looking at the watch, and I said, could we stop there? And Geshe is very kind to stop there. So where is the traveling mic? Yeah. So I would like to give the mic first to Rena, because we talked before, and she has a question to start off.
Question from last time.
Yeah.
But it actually works out really well for this time.
Okay.
So let's just clarify, because
Okay.
there's
Sure.
a lot of terms here that sometimes I hear them being used interchangeably, not with us, but in
Right.
different teachings that I've heard.
Right.
So we spoke about the self-sufficiently, substantially
Right.
existing self,
Yes.
and then the inherent self, or
Yes.
the intrinsic self. That's
Right.
the same thing. Then most of the time we hear that the self-sufficiently substantial self is an acquired kind of, it arises from acquired grasping,
Right.
and then the inherent one is an innate type of grasping.
Right.
Can we clarify that first, and then we'll add the courses
Okay,
up.
sure. Koran tiwa kachi sheba de redi ji shu cho ji sa. Tering sung je de koran sang ma de chung ba de wa ge. Da nge ju da ji che men do. Se ne ene this go de gen da ka sa di na le da tanye da ma ma bo shi pe ji shi go wa ge. Tanye de zam chu yung do sa wa ge. Da ka san ji ka le sung go ni se na nga zo tyo mo me gi da dang gong de che wen na 강사 랑자 퇴베 제유 생겨 와게 동베 다 동바치 다시 거 와게 직제로 안 딘데디 아니 가서 다 강사 랑자 퇴베 제유 짐바디 다 짐바 가서 가서 이나게 디로와 군다 로와게
군다
딘데 고샤사
니가 요래다 랑자 바데 니가 당시 랑자 군다 미샤로와
나래
랑자 바데 니요다 니요다
노 알로 모랑 딘데 고도 와게 직제
라스
다 딘데 가서 랑싱기 두바 짐바 생겨 와게 디 텐제기 짐바 고도 와게 딘데 가와는 거니 와게 가서 강사 랑제 되베 제유 짐바디 군다체 로게 테스 라고르체
Ale.
랑신 되베 짐바디 렌제체 로게 포테 스타르체 로게 니 니레라 임바이나 알레 디세시나로나서 투아샤마도 마숑네
Tita mo tita mare. Khansa rangya tibala gunda chag mare lenje yores. Rangji tibala gunda lenje nga yore.
So
Chikbar.
I think Geshe is getting to your thing. He said not exactly the way probably you just reported here. He said in the case of self-sufficient, substantially existent self, there are two versions, or two aspects, I should say. One is the acquired or the intellectual aspect. The other is the automatic or the innate aspect to it. Same with the intrinsic grasping. There is the what called the acquired aspect, as well as there is the innate aspect to it. So I think he's getting to where, right? He said, so there are two. It's not like every case of, we should say, grasping as self-sufficient, substantial existent self is an acquired one. Yeah. It doesn't, Yeah.
That actually makes sense.
No.
Okay, then let's add the coarse and the subtle.
Right.
Because also within the acquired, there's a coarse and the subtle.
Right.
Within the innate, there's a coarse
Coarse
and the
and
subtle.
subtle, yes.
So
Sure.
I always thought coarse was.
Yes, that's what I said.
the-
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Yeah. That is actually shown some other some time that could do you so one.
Ale.
That did you do like any cars or that and then I'm to king so many range to be Zimba in a range to Zimba de Leta, Kunta chat the Lenny Chat or some Bargain.
Ale.
That young Namji did some of those cars or again. Didn't they chat really yata and so in a Tara again?
Ala.
Tara. Benakunda Chadele Rabayo, the Tabucher again.
Ale.
And then Casata, Lenny Chadele Rabba the Trouble. That did call the Says Yabushun and us again.
Really, that did ya. Tiare. Kara. Shui dangzi maingel ya dangzi rakwa se adu. Ta tanyi dami da hiya yora wa. Sida gunda da lenje kewa kare se na desi wa da gaje.
No.
Eni bi yude sami da. Bedi khansa rangye teba eni rangye teba. Shiru bidu rangye teba khansa yores. Eni kare se na ko eni shuji tonga zi eni bi soki lo mi je. Shuji si lo jega tuwa si.
No, so.
Ko tonga soki mi tonga wa ko da yores. Tire yude sami siya tela. Gunda asi ko riwa.
No, so.
다 가라 기리를 이용해 지야들라 아니 렌제서 그것도 그 기제 삼로 가던 거 말아봐 가서 삼로도 안 거는 풍보로 삼로 코디고 다 가지 기상에 탐세지리 열시바
No.
풍보가디 야가지 이제는 풍보가 파트에 양 렌게 제라말 삼로는 열라이바 어 딘데 저러 될 렌제서 거다
No, so. First, Geshe wants to clarify the difference between acquired or intellectually developed, as we call it, Quintag in Tibetan, and Lenje, which is the automatic or the innately developed. Okay. Usually, when we think in terms of the acquired or the intellectual developed one, that kind of grasping is usually arises from reasoning, thinking about reasoning, right? Analytical thinking, if you will. The example Geshe has given here is also, for example, in the non-Buddhist schools of thought, not all of them, right? You know that in certain, at least we know, they believe that there is a self-sufficient, person or a self. Okay, and they said why? They said, when we look at a guy called Lejin, or let's make it John, right? That's easier for us to remember than Lejin, So when we look at John walking towards us, what we really see is the John's body, right? Form. But we don't say like, oh, I see the John's body, approaching me, right? We just simply say, there comes John. So he said, there is a self-sufficient person, right? Something, because we attribute John coming, not the John's body, the visible form approaching us. So therefore, they reason it, right? So that kind of a belief is, we call it acquired or maybe intellectually developed. That's not a good word, but that's what it is. But the automatic or the innately developed one is we don't necessarily have to think about reasoning. It just naturally there, and that's what we said, how things appear to us as intrinsically existent. We don't have to think about reason. That's how it appears to us. I remember the example I gave you last time about this comes from a text called Namde Thalam Seje, clarifying the path to the liberation thing. He said, if we are just left alone, and if we are given a choice, like I want to exchange this old grumpy body for the good one, right? Isn't it? Right? If I could exchange my body, right, for a better one, I want to do that. So that sense of I we have naturally, that's more like the innately formed impression of I, as if there is this kind of an intrinsic I, that can really do this transaction. I give you my yucky body and give me your good one to me, right? Sort of that thing. Okay. That didn't long.
디 제가 그 삼어 갔다면서 그다 거사 풍부 로스 독득할 삼고 말아.
Right.
말디 지나 풍부 가면 밖에서 더더 랭게지 삼는 요라. 디 디고.
Right. Of course, in one way we ask like, do you think there is a person separate from your own bodies and aggregate? You said no, right? But the fact that we want to exchange it, right? You said, give me your better body, I'll give you mine. That means that there is I here that can acquire the good body and give you the bad one, right? So we still have a sense of that, right? So that's what it is. That's innate one or the automatic one. Okay. 다 되는 게 차라시요. 다 단다 당지 차라스네 민들어. 단다 군다래 차라시, 레겔래 차라시고로 니간데 있어서.
차라스는 답변은 디디스 차라스는 레라델야 락바스그러다.
No.
다 그게 깔레카가 무지르 카운도 탐텔라 참모스고로.
No.
다 답변은 디시고다. 다도 싫어봐 다시 랑아지 자세 켈랭도와.
No.
때때 락바랑 장디샤고 다르와. 가자 풍보를 놓으시 딱바시 참미시. 다 대피질 매버를 지금 또 쇼고로 왔다. 또 저도와. 다 런데도 그 풍보 놓으서 요 말이 풍보 강을 요르시.
No.
라고요와. 때때 차서.
No.
신의 풍보 강을 이기요지 켈랭고 요르와.
그래.
지셔도 텔레데데 양데 차송아.
다 군다 차라니 차.
다다 구다 차이도 말다 단다 지당을
차라로
지당 차라 데레다 다디가 태조가 신은 다 풍부땡을 요 말스 나오러와
그래.
데다 내랑시 들어봐야지 똑배다서 뭐데 풍부데 율된 잘 묘샤운데 이 카르 로서
그래.
어디 차라서 지다 들리다 이 단데 데스고래 군다라 차라니 스고래
올라온 군다라 차라니 현재를 차라니 스고로 디페로 샤고스나.
군다 차라니 데레다 베나 데르와 거사 군다로 군다스는 다 군다 당시 군다 원에 있는데 야 군다 다 세계 인가 찍바샤고로와 이 지당 당시에는 치료 데르다 거사 군다 락바시 나 먼저 베나 데르 머베 거사 라자트 지 켈링 다베다 라자트 지 요리 땅이 라마제 요마데 라자트 지 요리 시아디 켈랑나 어디다 고다 차데 두고와 두고와 지나산 샤고라 어디 라시 두발라 찍바라 와다 찍바도
라시 두발을 빼간데 샤오는 게
라시 두발라 다데 라시 두발라 차라 샤네데 데다 차라 샤고라와 라시 두발 코로나 차라 샤나
유 차라 원에 샤슈고 나게
라
pana rangshin tube jinyu yorwa gen ji chawal tene yang ko chawal sha pana tabana gen dyuma je chol rangshin tube jimba de char sha chogona pana ngobe che sugjen ba de zola ko rakol sha chogona ne
데데 피제 체스 요 말에 가르서는 고 최정 산이 지 시를 뭐 단다디 태교로시나 가자디 지 바샤고라 시쇼제 가샤 지 바샤고라 제가 고 최정의 세미 더서는 인디가 요바 찍바 찾아샤고 말 가르서 가서 뒤쳐도 지단 여바다 랑시 주바 여바니 무유 찍바 샤고도와 오늘은 랑시 주바 여바도 랑시 메바도 그러와 또 그래도 신나 랑시 메바도 사디단 이 여바도 되면서 가 여바도 이 찍바 되고 뭐도 쉐시 접던 그거가 야 여바도야 깔리면도 됐어 무유 있어
다 랑시 주바 짐베디 가서 다 짐바델이야 다 타와시다 라고 샤고는 가는
라바 샤는 피다 라바군다 샤나다 지샤고다 랑지웨 지야게 다 당지도 태교로 샤잖아 태교로 샤 랑지부 지야데 랑지 주바지 군다 샤는 되게 랑지 주바지 군데 샤고 말와
알다 군다 데데 디스ken 다 렌제 쳐 말왜
라
겐기 디선다 랑신 주바지 짐벨 렌제 데라야 타라니 요르선 로와게
렌제라
타라니 용거 버게
렌제
군다라 타라 요르
렌제라 타라니 샤는 디고로 가라서는 랑지부 짐바 샤야지기야 고 주데 마심바 지야지고로 주데 상어단 지야지고로
어디 라바샤
어디 주데 상어단 샤야디 에디 군다샤 주데 메바 지야데 라바샤는 리베도 렌제 라바샤
나서 알아다 틴주버기 미겠다도 가라 랑주버기 달henje 진데디 틴주버면 되는 라바를 찾으러.
잡아샷. 네.
Okay, I was trying to make sure that I get everything right. So we now differentiated between what is acquired and what is automatic or innate, right? And then for each grasping, whether it is acquired or innate, we said there could be coarse and subtle versions of the aspects. Okay? Now, in the case of the acquired grasping, the coarse can be, for example, in the some of the, I should say, not non-Buddhist schools of thought, they believe in what we call permanent, partless, independent person self, right? Takchi Ramanchangita, right? So they believe there is a self or person that is permanent, that is partless, and that's independent. Okay? And so that is acquired grasping. But for most of us Buddhists, that is easier to understand because person is not permanent, impermanent, and person is dependent upon many parts. It's not partless, isn't it? So for us, that is like a coarse form of acquired grasping, if you will. Okay. Now the subtle one in this case could be the grasping at self-sufficient, substantially existent self or the I. Okay. Because in some Buddhist schools of thought, they said, well, there is no personal self that's completely independent of the aggregates, as some schools believe, right? They said that's not. But they believe still the self exists like somewhere in the aggregates, isn't it? So they think it is findable. It has to be findable within the aggregates, right? We don't know which one, maybe this one, that one, right? And so that kind of a grasping, right, at sort of a findable self, self-sufficient, substantial existent self, relatively speaking, is a subtler version of acquired grasping. Yes, do you see that? The two grasping. And
last time we labeled that one as the inherent one. The one that is within the aggregates we said is the inherent one, and the one that is separate from the aggregates is the one that becomes self-sufficient, substantial self.
Let me go back to check the Geshe. Konang samba kazang nindes koin serwa tanda kansa rangja thebe zeyu gi tag seyorwa ge inde ta seyu na an phungbo da be tön shin de be ta jla rwa ge chilo yu ba sa rwa ge kansa rangshin ji be ta seyu na rwa ge di phungbo na lu yu de kazang nindes ko bra do wa
o te ta da dudan seyorwa da do de la mar de da do de wa da do o ma ge shena da kansa phungbo de seyorwa
la re
다 랑제들 비디오도 샤고 말하고 추어 봐요 말아 치료도 샤고로
와 랑제 비디오도 봐 치료 샤고
너도 추어도 샤고 말아 풍부간 주 샤고로
단데 제마 가서디 제도니 얘기 랑제도 비디오 다 등에 열어요
메스
알아 여be 이나 풍부나요 그래서 알아 I think Geshe thought maybe this is where probably the confusion arose because we were discussing about different schools of thought at that day. So what we're saying is that in certain school of non-Buddhist schools, they believe that there is self-sufficient, substantially existent self of a person. It's out there, right? And but within the schools, Buddhist schools of thought, the lower schools, Vaibhasika, Sautrantika, right, where they also accept intrinsic reality self, but not the self-sufficient, substantially existent self. But they said that if it were to exist as, right, then it should be findable within the aggregate. They said not outside there, right? And that's why maybe the confusion arose, what we thought, right? So it's a position of different schools of thought. Non-Buddhist school of thought said there is, apart from outside the aggregates, there is self-sufficient, substantially existent self. Okay, some non-Buddhist school, let's put it that way. And no Buddhist schools of thought believe in that. But the Vaibhasika and Sautrantikas, they said if such a self were to exist, then it should be findable within our aggregates, right? It could not exist apart from the aggregate. It has to be findable within the aggregates. So when we analyze it, we couldn't find it. So therefore, they said it doesn't exist. Yeah. So that's where different schools of thought. Yeah. Now going back to the continuation of what he was saying, in the case of automatic grasping or the innately developed, Renje we call it, there could be two versions, coarse and the subtle. That depends upon from what school we are looking at it. From Pasangika Madhyamika school's point of view, certain grasping that Savatandika Madhyamikans, for example, right, have about the reality, that could be considered as a coarse form of innate grasping, whereas grasping at intrinsic reality is the subtle grasping for Prasangika Madhyamikas. Okay, so looking at other schools of thought where they have some innate grasping, they consider this as a coarse graspings, whereas the grasping at intrinsic reality itself is a subtle grasping of the innate version. Okay, yeah. We can do one more question there. Yeah.
Now, from a practical point of view, without
Right.
Buddhist, non-Buddhist school, just from a practical point of view,
Right.
you have a child,
Right.
he goes to school,
Yes.
he does a test, he comes home.
Right.
He scores whatever he scores. Teacher says, you're stupid.
Right.
Now this child believes, I'm stupid because I scored
Right,
X,
right.
Y, and Z grade.
Right.
Now, he didn't wake up, so it's not an innate thing. He didn't wake up believing who I am is stupid.
Right.
He got it later, so I'm wondering if that's an acquired form of grasping. Now he believes he's
Okay,
stupid.
sure. Right. Hala, da kwana tanda di rawa ken, di se wada nganzo tanda gunda chacho rawa ken, ta ken gyunzen samu songwa ken. Di tela dinde chugu rawa sa, ta bena nganzo da jidangi neju jawe na, ta puku je labda chin rawa ken, puku labda chin, labda liya kwe yigze rawa yabu ma jo su yong rawa, jidu kana kegen na pame sheshan rawa, kira kupa rake tira kharas rawa ken. Labda kana puku de ta kunjo nga kupa rasin ba sam yigze chin rawa ken. Kaza puku de ko dinde yigze di, ane nganzo yina ta gunda rawa shana digo rawa sa, ka mi khana ko zan kora de yigze chigo rawa ken. Mato je kora ya, nango ni ya sayi de nga kupa rasa san ni segi rawa sa rawa ken. Lembar, di gunda charu shan digo na sa, mi shengi chik res lab so se de yigze chebe na.
tēnē gunda rēsi kī mārē. Gunda sī sōsū sāmu tāni, yīngwa yūdēn dīndē nūsī, tī tōngi xie sō nā, zīng sō nā gunda sī kōrē. Sōsū yūdē, kō chīk rēshā sī, kār chīk ngē tōngi sī, gundē sō kō rēshā sī sī chīk, sōsū tōngyā sī kōrē wā. O tē tōngi yūdēn tōngi kōne, zīng sō nā gunda sī kōrē. Rāwa yūdēn mē wā shē, tā kō rāngshīng sōsū zīng yō wā hā mō wā sō chī yō rā wā.
Mi ki chik lam dēli yigze chebe zang gunda chago ma
Tēnē
rawa.
gunda sī kōrē.
The acquired one, or the Kunda in Tibetan, I usually translate as intellectually developed one. Okay, as I said, that has to come through one's own thinking or reasoning, whether the reasoning is good reason or not. Okay, not that we just simply believe in what somebody, says who you are. Like in the case of a child, right? We can call the child, how stupid can you be? And then the child thinks, okay, now I'm kind of stupid. My mom said it, my teacher said, right? That belief does not constitute acquired. In this case, what we call acquired belief system. The acquired belief system here, intellectual, has to come through one's own thinking process, some kind of reasoning. You think, I think this is what it is, So that is called acquired. Yeah. I know the English term acquired, and that's why the Tibetan actually says Phuntsok. Literally, it means almost like imputed grasping, right? But we said Phuntsok as translate, conceptually as intellectually formed grasping. Maybe we have to find a better word so people see. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Could you give him the Sure.
Follow on that.
Yeah. Sure.
I was thinking about a child.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the example of innate grasping that you gave,
Right.
of the person who wants the other body.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know that you need or might want another body till you've had enough experience. So that led me to wonder about a child in that moment. Would a child have innate grasping of that kind? And it doesn't seem likely because a child doesn't know suffering of the body to know to want.
Right.
So that example of innate grasping didn't make sense to me as something that exists outside of experience or intellectual work. So is there another example of innate grasping that, or is there no example of innate grasping that precedes experience? Does that make sense?
Quran ki condition di this again that agi lenje ki zimba chyor wa ge lenje ki zimba kin da ki page sung yin ba chidan sen nga zo ane be kansa da phungbu ni kaka yor din de la da ba da yin da phungbu sang ye chebya shi do na chebo sam ba ro wa de chi lenge jo sam da ro wa din de cheli ya lenje ki pe sha ro wa ge pe di Quran la ya da ka so re cho chin ne chi de sam lo chi chi de pe na 그 보고지를 삼을 땅 소마게
예.
보고들 야 단다지 미제 냠냠으로 스메다 딘데기 처로 시작이 말을 와게 수부 제베스로 와게
예.
디멘베 빼 야가로지 샤바지 송야이나 야면나 현재기 아주 짐바딜에 빼 샤야 매버 차고나 간데이나 소르게 점저로 빼 샴바시랑
현재기
남만 슉슉 용한데 그거로
어데 강가 휴유시고 다 거기가 유대가에 섬마다 지금 임베레 섬양도 지시도 다 저도데 간도다 빼셔는 신데다 현재도 군다셔야지 뉴모 같은 게 계셔마도 지금 저도 희바 강가를 내지 군다가 타이스가 요마라
라레
요마르디 저도 다 가제 수 유대는 선 지레야사 강가를 다 군다 샤도르 샤고레 다 유대는 가말만 바 가 미세 군도 가 매셔니 직시샤저와 다 들리기로 샤고마레
라레
어디죠
디슈는 지금 말게서 கொஞ்சம் 소환이 냠냠에서 간저 배나 겔henye 샤도 간을 야 깨어만 뭐 공배만 거 용거를 쓰고 와게
어디
공시제니 용거는 공시면은 용셔요 말다 공시면만 알아도 렌제 세지요 말 와게
네네 네
공시 왕게 렌제 차대는데 다
뭐래 다 도스 다다도 대세다 너무 검시한 거 송돼야 될 렌제셔 다 되려면 해예도 요가래디 갑도 유jen도 지금 때네 로버도 양고 유주를 태워야 되는라 군다 아실라나
No, sir. Yeah, Geshe said that when we talk about innate grasping, actually it is really grounded in the habituated experiences. There is no such things like preceding any experience. We cannot talk about innate grasping. From Buddhist point of view, how we believe in many lives before, right after. So over many lifetimes, we have formed that habit, right? So due to that deeply embedded habit, we have this natural tendency to believe in, grasp at something, right, without need to think. It just comes naturally. So that is what we usually think in terms of innate grasping. Okay? Now something situationally, right, due to some factors, like something grasping, now that could be part of intellectual acquired grasping due to certain conditions, Maybe that might probably help us to think a little differently. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So thank you again. So we'll stop there today. Thank you for active participation. Before I forget this dedication, I want to announce this. So with the permission of Geshe Chetalas here, I'm announcing that there will be a screening of Mystic Mountain, a new Tibetan, I think, film produced by one of our own. The director Sring Dundula is here today. Maybe some of you have seen him before. And so it will be shown on Thursday, February 4 at 7 in Los Angeles. The theater is called Landmark Regent Theater on the Broxton Avenue at 7. So the entrance is $15. Okay? And if you are interested, you can check with me, information, or check with him. And so we hope you're going to go there. I hope to go there, but I'll see my teaching schedule. Sometimes I keep Mystic Mountain, and it is at the Landmark Regent Theater, Thursday, February 4. Okay. And Lord, that is Kange Lord, Dimye, Dinda, Yinda, Namda, Rabsebe, Jinye, Dungun, Jishin, Sije, Nije, Toga, Lebamje, Kandas, Maria Mendon, Dongen, Gisebe, Lozo, Gunla, Boje, Daze, Yanla, Tuju, Yanden, Son, Ruda, Cheto, Newmon, Leje, Jado, Doze, Maria Munse, Dongen, Nugo, Jinye, Juze, Radi, Nam, Dene, Daje, Saju, Daze, Yenden, Lunzo, Jose. Junyi Jenden, Dalu, Munze, Jambe, Yangla, De, Omara Bazana, Omara Bazana, De, Zenden, Juji, Kenra, Vese, Dalu, Timo, Mimba, Rasene, Kada, Tenju, Shunglu, Zom, Lode, Bove, Nawa, Sendo, Lode, Yazu, Udun, Pekade, Kesan, Pongbe, Judo, Membashi, Zilla, Wando, Yichube, Tanya, Chugun, Chola, so on. Obeisance to my Guru and Protector Manjushri, who holds at his heart a scriptural text symbolic of his seeing all things as they are, whose intelligence shines forth as the sun, unclouded by delusions or traces of ignorance, who teaches in 60 ways with the loving compassion of Father for his only Son, all creatures caught in the prison of samsara, confused in the darkness of their ignorance, overwhelmed by their suffering. You whose dragon thunder-like proclamation of Dharma arouses us from the stupor of our delusions and free us from the iron chains of our karma, who wills this sort of wisdom, hewing down suffering wherever sprouts appear, clearing away the darkness of ignorance. You who have been pure from the beginning, who have completed the stages achieving the highest perfection of a bodhisattva, whose princely body is adorned with 112 marks of a Buddha, I bow down to you, Manjushri. Om Arapaza Nadi. O compassionate one, with the brilliance of your wisdom, illuminate the darkness enclosing my mind, enlighten my intelligence and wisdom so that I may gain insight into Buddha's words and the texts that explain them. Like the sweet perfume of white lotus, born in the ocean of knowledge, nourishing honeybees, the fortunate beings, your fame pervades all directions. You are proficient and powerful in upholding the precious doctrine. To you, O Lobsang Tenzin Wangda, respectfully I pray.